Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Cami Guevara. I'm an occupational therapist, and I'm a member of Filipino Occupational Therapists for Mental Health, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you all so much for attending our event today. We appreciate you taking your time to be with us during our webinar. SOT for MH, your safe space, is so excited to present our speakers for today. I believe that there's so many things that we can learn from them, and I'm so excited to hear from them regarding the field of occupational therapy and occupational therapy mental health. So before we start, just a few reminders. Please keep your microphone on mute and video cameras turned off during the presentation so as to minimize distractions and background feedback. Our program today consists of two main parts. So first off, our topics from our local speakers and then topics from our international speakers. So after each part, there'll be a forum for a short question and answer. So you can send in your questions anytime throughout the talk via the chat box for our facilitators to collate for the forum. If you have any questions or if you experience any technical difficulties, you can also message our facilitators. So there'll be those with their organization affiliation. So we have March PSS or Restart before their names. Okay, so far we're seeing few of our participants here already. We'd like to acknowledge our international audience, our international participants. So we have quite a few here. We also want to acknowledge one of our international speakers in the main participants hallway. So we have Dr. Duncan. I saw her earlier on the meeting. So hello there. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for being with us here today. For everyone, we hope you enjoy and we hope that you learn a lot from our speakers, from the speakers that we have today. And I hope that you're all excited because I know I'm excited. So before we start, we'd like to introduce and thank our partners for our partner organizations today, without whom this event would not be possible. First, we'd like to thank March PSS. We'd like to thank Restart, Open Arms Organization, JCI Batangas Balisong, Zero Kilometro, and Parola. Okay, so we have around 33 participants now. So we can begin. So for our first part of our program, our first speaker is presented by March PSS, one of our major partner organizations. So to know more about the organization, let's watch this video. Okay, so we'll have our first speaker again by March PSS. Minnie, she'll be our first speaker. She's an occupational therapist who has been working in community based settings for over 20 years. Her passion to serve the underserved has led her to work in humanitarian agencies in Namibia, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines to help develop and sustain health and rehabilitation programs. Her expertise and experiences in community and mental health work provided her with opportunities to teach in Veles College Cebu and to serve as the camp administrator of the March Village Relocation Camp in Bantayan, Cebu, post Yolanda disaster. So, to talk with us today on the hues of occupational therapy and community mental health psychosocial support in this time of the pandemic, let's all welcome Ms. Maria Minerva G. Lagria, OTRP. I think we're experiencing a bit of a technical difficulty. So let's check. Miss Minnie, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just waiting for the slides. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think it's showing
Okay.
now po the slides. Yeah.
Yes. The use of occupational therapy and mental health this time of the pandemic. Okay, I next page, please. Streaming across the northern sky, gliding, dancing, bursting, a kaleidoscopic of colors, of hope and renewed dreams. Magical aurora borealis. Fellow occupational therapists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Aurora borealis. Borealis is a phenomenon that happens above the northern skies, the northern hemispheres. The collision emits a pale kaleidoscopic of hues from red, yellow, green, blue, and violet that ripples, shoots, or streams gracefully across the sky. A beautiful phenomenon. There's that collision. The collision emits disruption, the disturbance. However, this creates an amazing phenomenon. In the field of occupational therapy, this conflict can be health conditions, can be diseases, accidents, and these causes disruptions of our daily routines, of the roles that we perform, of the habits that we do, and our participations in any activities in the community. In January 2020, the Philippines started to see two cases of coronavirus. Just two cases first. In March 2020, a tremendous increase of cases to 633. And I can just remember that very moment in the classroom when we were summoned to stop our classes because we have to let go to dismiss our classes, to dismiss our students so that we still have time to go back home to the provinces. And I think that was the beginning of a traumatic journey for all of us. And I think you can also all remember that moment wherever you were. So the pandemic, COVID-19, have curtailed our participation in our usual social roles. My role as a teacher, the performance of my daily routines, of my weekly routine rather, that's traveling to Cebu every weekend is no longer exist. My everyday, the habits that my habits, it's already disrupted. And there's also that financial insecurities, which actually sometimes would make me think, am I still gonna have that my salary next month? Am I still gonna have my job the next 3 months? And there are nights that I would wonder, what is going on? There's so much uncertainties, and this triggers fears, hopelessness, and so much anxiety. And honestly, for me, there's that fear of death of a family member, death of somebody so close to me. And another thing that also changed because of this pandemic is that, the usual things that we do. First, there was the face to face classes, and now we do virtual classes. It is just so different. And so the people who are affected by the emergencies usually experience this stress. There's that feelings of anxiety, of sadness, hopelessness, difficulty in sleeping. And I think a lot of us are experiencing that. There's also that fatigue when we sometimes wonder, why am I this tired when I have not really done anything during the course of the day. I remember when I was in Sri Lanka that there was this little boy who kept on following us, and she was just always crying, always missing the family because, of course, when the tsunami hit the country, he was the only one who survived the catastrophe. And yes, disaster affects so many people, not only that very moment of of the incident, but even years after the catastrophe had happened. um Extreme, there's this extreme stressors, which is a risk factor for social mental for social um I cannot okay, there is this extreme stressors that can be, or which is a risk factor for for social and mental health. And because of that, you see a lot of people who really get affected. I can We have some members of the community here, we have some beneficiaries here in the village who still, when they remember Typhoon Haiyan, will suffer or would suffer palpitation. They would ask me, they will tell me, ma'am, can we not talk about it? Or when we ask them to give testimonies, they would be crying endlessly. And it is because of that disaster that they have experienced. Okay. So when the tsunami hit the Asian shores, the survivors showed a wide range of anxiety, like um, where we stayed in a hotel. The hotel owner would endlessly, like the whole day, would just stare at the oceans. And if we come to see him, he would just tell us, I know all the valleys, the mountains, and the creeks and the rivers under the water. And I would wonder, creeks, what? Rivers under the water. And it was because he was there when the tsunami hit. Good for him, he survived. And because of that, there were times that he would avoid us. Um, he would avoid the the people staying in the resort, or sometimes he would even panic when there is just little changes of the tidal flow. Sometimes these people, because of because of a very sad experience that they have, something that's so traumatizing, they feel so humiliated, they feel so rejected. And this is a case of one of a member of the community who was cyberbullied because of something that was sexually related. And so she wouldn't even come to the village. She would rather stay with somebody outside the community because of that fear, because of the rejection that she was feeling. And in this current pandemic, to me, this can be likened to a tsunami. Why tsunami? There's no water and all. But we did not see this virus coming. We never expected this to come. We had so many plans and projects for 2020. And worse, this virus is invisible to our naked eyes. What's more, we have protocols that we need to follow. And these protocols, health protocols, are so stressful, as what our very own Dr. Mike C. quipped. Cordon sanitaire, social distancing, restricted not only the people's mobility, but also its their participation but also their occupational participation. So occupational therapy and mental health. So what is the I mean, why am I talking about the disaster? And this is because disaster can actually, like what I mentioned, affect our mental health. Occupational therapy is there to facilitate engagement in occupation. And um, excuse me, I cannot. There's something wrong with the screen. I cannot fully see the text. I'm sorry, guys. Or it has something to do with my screen. I'm really sorry.
It's okay po. Are you able to see it now?
I cannot see a third of the screen. That's why I've been struggling. I was really
Okay.
struggling. I couldn't see the full text.
Okay. We'll try to troubleshoot it. Wait.
Mm, okay, then maybe I can.
Sorry. We'll try to stop the screen share and then we'll share it again. So with
I'm
like the
sorry.
it's
I was
okay.
really struggling. Like I
Yeah,
can only half of
it's
this since the
yeah.
beginning of my presentation. I was
Okay.
ad libbing.
Yeah, it's okay because I mean with the technical things, I think it's really part of how webinars work now. So it's fine.
Okay, let me just close all the things that's in my. Okay, then I maybe let me do
Are you
this.
able to see it now? We try to share the screen again.
Or maybe can I just do from my side? Can I
Yeah.
do share screen from my side?
Yes, yes. Okay.
Can I
You
just
can try that.
open it?
Okay.
Is it okay? Can I try?
Yes, Bob.
Okay, let me try. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Okay, maybe I'll do the PDF. Can you see? Oh, but this is the PDF one I opened.
Wala pa po. It's still not showing the your
Ah,
screen
okay,
share.
yes. Okay. Then I do this. Then I go again to hmm.
Yes. So we're having some technical difficulties. I think it's normal. It's fine because with the technology and having to do this um online, it really brings that extra added activity demand of trying to fix the technical aspect. Are you able
Yeah,
to
I'm
share a
sorry.
screen na po?
But it was good when we did the dry run. It was
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-mm.
It was perfect.
Maybe we can try it from our side again, and then let's see if you can view it better.
Okay.
There is. Can you see the whole screen now?
Okay. It's still a third is still gone. Maybe is there anything I can do from this side?
Um. Okay.
But it was okay earlier.
Yes.
It was really perfect. I mean, I was able to read, when we did a dry run, it was okay. Sorry guys. Exit full screen. Okay, can you do it again, I?
No.
Can you see my can you see
Um.
my presentation?
Uh. Are you the one sharing now? Po? I think it's still
Yes.
March PSS sharing. Oh wait here. Okay. So okay. If ever you want po, Miss Minnie, yeah, we can actually see your screen. I can see your screen share na po. Um. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes po. I can. We can see it. Can you see your own screen po?
Yeah, I can see now
Okay.
perfectly.
Sige po. If
Okay,
this
not
is okay now with you.
everything, not just half of it, and try to just imagine it was the other half of the
Yeah.
slide. Okay, so where was I? Oh, as a shared window is closed, somebody closed.
Okay. Or if ano po, pwede po na kayo na lang po yung kahit wala na pong slides.
Ganon.
If
Okay.
if it will be easier po for you, even if we don't do the slides, and then just you so that you have your own copy na lang po. Look at your own copy na lang. Read from your slides na lang po, and then it's okay if we don't screen share for now.
Um. Okay, but the thing is, the next slides would be. I'm sorry,
It's okay. It's really part of like the po,
but
how
it
the
was
webinar
okay when
things
we did
work.
the practice.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes.
I'm just actually thinking what to do.
Um,
Mm,
you can read na lang po from your slides. Um,
from my slide, but then the next thing would be pictures.
oh, okay. Yung pictures po pwedeng like to follow na lang so we can ano send in the presentation maybe later on. Pero I am getting reports that the screen was working na po. It was okay na.
Really?
Yeah, the
Okay, let
screen
me
share
do.
when you tried the screen share. Yes.
Okay, let me do it again. Okay, let me just do this.
Okay. Okay. We can see it naman po if
Okay, so let me just. I don't even know. Okay. So, most people affected by emergencies will experience distress, the feelings of anxiety, sadness, hopelessness, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, irritability or anger, and or aches and pains. And I think I have mentioned I had given examples earlier. And then exposure to extreme stressors is a risk factor for social and mental health, including common mental disorders. And this is really so true because we have members here in the community who actually have mental disorders. And it is because of some events in the past that have caused these mental conditions. Disaster and mental health. In 2004, when the tsunami hit the Asian shores, The survivors showed a wide range of symptoms related to anxiety, and like the story I have shared earlier, that when we were taking part of the rebuilding Sri Lanka, we were staying in this particular hotel, and the owner would probably just a whole day stare at the ocean and telling us stories about what he saw underneath. And there are times that he would just withdraw from us, his guests, and and yes, it really affects people, and it hinders them from performing their their occupation. So in the case of the current pandemic, to me it can be likened to a tsunami. Well, there's no water, but we did not know it was coming. And worse, this virus is invisible to our naked eyes. Therefore, health protocols have been implemented to prevent the spread of the virus, which I think are extreme stressors. And this, as our colleague Dr. Mike C. quipped, cordon sanitaire and physical distancing restricted not only the people's mobility but also their occupational participation. Like, I so miss going to Cebu City and teach and see my students and talk to them face to face. And these things are not happening these days anymore. Occupational therapy and mental health. The focus of occupational therapy is what? To facilitate engagement in occupation in order to support participation in valued life roles and activities, and to enhance the quality of life. Therefore, occupational therapy practitioners have an important role in responding to disasters. We think that only the doctors, we think that only the people who are in the military are 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 the significant individuals who need to be at the site of the disaster, or after the disasters, or only the social workers. But no, it's not true. Occupational therapy practitioners we do have important roles to play here. Myriad roles of occupational therapy in a pandemic: provision of mental health, psychosocial support. What is MHPSS? MHPSS has been defined as any type of local or outside support that aims to protect or promote psychosocial well being and or prevent or treat mental disorder. The past, maybe a year or a couple of years back, I always think of an MHPSS as only the debriefing. But I actually realize, as we now serve the community, that MHPSS is not just a debriefing. MHPSS has this pyramid of intervention, the intervention pyramid for mental health and psychosocial support. First, at the bottom, we have the basic services and security. The next level is the community and family support. The next is the focus and non-specialized supports. And at the top of the pyramid is the specialized services. For us occupational therapists, it's not because we claim that we are jack of all trade, but we actually can serve from the bottom of the pyramid to the top most of the pyramid. We we can do a lot of things at this level: the basic services and security, the community and family support, um, focus and non-specialized support, and the specialized services. And my role here in the community, my work here in the community, as immersed also here in the community, I have the privilege and I have that opportunity to explore the different roles of OT in this pyramid. So, basic services and security. We can be advocates for the provision of basic needs like shelter. We don't need to be carpenters to do that. We can be advocates. We can rally for for policymakers to come up with programs so that those who are affected by disasters can have budgets for housing. We can raise funds, and it's not because we have we have gone out from our area of from our field, but it is because we want our we want our population to go back and participate in the things that they usually did before the before a particular disaster, like a simple um, dinner or meal at their dining room. And this wouldn't happen if they are still staying in relocation camps. So there is a role there. And then another one is mobilizing community volunteers. I have this opportunity to capacity build community volunteers so that um, they can help us implement the programs that we have set. Programs like tutorial services, programs like cleanups, um, and all that. Then we also have um, we can also plan and organize with the community. And by doing this, we are actually empowering the community. It is not that we are taking over the job of the social worker, but isn't it also our job or our role to empower individuals so that they can fully participate in community activities. They cannot just be locked in their rooms. They cannot just be isolated or just forever or just isolate themselves um, in their gardens or in their fishing areas. But we need them to have their voice. We need them to participate in the development of their communities. And then under community and family support, we can we can also help in livelihood activities so that we can secure sustainable food supply should a lockdown takes for weeks. So here what we did when the lockdown started, we went back to I encourage the community to go back to their gardens because we don't know, our supplies actually come from the city, and what if there's a total lockdown? There will be no tracking, and what are we going to do? Where are we going to get our food supply? So so as an occupational therapist, I want them to be able to feed for themselves, not just to wait for dole outs. And so here you see um the this gardening. Okay. And then we also came up with livelihood activities like face mask making. And this ensures also the community to follow the health protocols. Okay. And then, it has been a problem and it has been a concern wherein students are now doing modular or are doing modular education. And just imagine parents who have not even gone to primary school or elementary school. How can they teach their children? And so I came up with the tutorial services together with another volunteer. And so we gathered, or we came up with schedules for our little ones from from preschool, they from preschool or kindergarten grade 1 to grade 7. And also in this photo, you see this is an example of a focus and non-specialized supports. When I discovered that we do have some members of the community who have suffered, who were still suffering from Typhoon Yolanda. Just imagine, Typhoon Yolanda was 4 years, it happened 4 or 5 years ago, but still until now they claim that they are still affected by that, they still have the trauma. So I organize something like this. I organize focused and non-specialized support by conducting debriefing with um, with those members of the community who are still suffering from trauma. And in this one, I was actually giving orientation. We were actually giving orientation to the health workers because they too needed the briefing because of an incident that we have in the community. There was a little girl who was cyberbullied. Her picture was distorted, and it was more of sexual or sex cyber bully, and everybody were so affected by that. And so we did debriefing to the health workers, and also after the debriefing we gave them orientation on how to go about or how to conduct debriefing themselves. Okay. And so specialized services. And for those members of the community who we identified to have mental conditions, we organize people, specialists to come to the community, specialists from the city to come. And so here in the picture, you can see that we are actually enlisting people, we're working with social workers, we're working here with psychologists, so that they can be taken to Cebu City or to the city, and they can be given the services that's appropriate to their conditions. So here also, because of the pandemic, we have children with special needs. They can no longer go to school, and their parents are worried because some of them have disruptive behaviors at home. And so I involve them in occupational teletherapy. Like this little boy here on the right side, he is attending teletherapy with with therapists in Cebu City, and also this little girl is also attending teletherapy. And so, yeah, these are the things that we can actually do in the community. Um, and so, from conflicts, disasters, diseases, actually come great opportunities for occupational therapists to explore new roles in the arena of mental health and discover a kaleidoscope of potential practices where we impact not only individuals but communities. We are not taking over the roles of the social workers, the nurses, um, the carpenters, the engineers, but we are here as occupational therapists because we want people to go back to their occupation. We want them uh, to participate in the activities that they were used to do. And so with this, guys, I would I would like to say that I hope you learned something from my presentation, and I'm very sorry the for that technical problem that we went through. And yeah,
Okay.
so
Thank you so much, Minnie. Even with all the technical difficulties and all the parang disruption in the technicals, it was we still learned something. We still picked up some few key points really. Like I liked how earlier you mentioned usually like when you think of MHPSS, it's like oh debriefing lang, or it's like
debriefing.
yeah, it's just like oh you do a little bit of counseling after this disaster. But it's like later on when you showed the areas that you actually do work in, like doing teletherapy, having the tutorial for the kids, you see that MHPSS isn't actually just like okay this disaster
Hmm.
happened and then debrief. No, there's actually more to that
No,
than
yeah, because
MHPSS.
that's what we think. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. Even with all the technical things, we still learned so many things. Thank you again. So for our participants, if you have any questions or if you want to clarify some points, you can send them in through the chat, and then we'll have a short question and answer portion later after our next speaker, so that these questions and concerns could be addressed. So again, thank you for that. Now we'll have on our next speaker. So our next speakers are from Restart, another of our major partner organizations today. So to know more about their organization, to know more about what they do, let's all watch this video. our next topic will be a joint speakership from Restart on the value of occupations, how occupational therapy contributes to mental health in correctional settings. So we have two speakers here. The first of which rather is Anna. She's the founder of Restart, a life skills training program for youth in detention centers in the city of Manila. She has been working with children below 18 years old and their families for the past 28 years in the Philippines, USA, Australia, and China. She graduated BS in Occupational Therapy and Masters of Rehabilitation Science from the University of the Philippines, Manila, and is currently taking PhD in Special Education at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Joining her today is Jam, who graduated BS in Occupational Therapy from the University of the Philippines, Manila. She is currently practicing as a pediatric OT consultant and an instructor at the University of the Philippines, Manila Department of Occupational Therapy. She is one of the core members of Restart, a life skills program for for youth in detention centers in Manila. So, without further ado, let's all welcome Ms. Ana Tan Pascual, MRS OTRP, and Ms. Jan Martha A. Celeste OTRP.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just getting my slides ready, and we're so happy to be here today to share with you how occupational therapy is serving teens who are in correction settings. I assume that most of you have never been to prison, and I assume that you've not known intimately a person who has been in prison, much more a teen who has been in correction setting. So in order for us to appreciate better what occupational therapy can do for teens who are in correction settings, we would like to introduce Juan to you. So this is Juan. He is a fictional character, yet he represents so many youth that we have met in our work with Restart. Juan is an only child, and his parents separated when he was only 2 years old. His mother took care of him, but then she met someone, and then she lived together with a new man and left Juan in the care of his Lola or his grandmother and never came back for him. Juan went to school until he was 10 years old. By then, he could only recognize a few letters and he could only write his first name. He couldn't write any other words, and even writing his name was a big difficulty for him. However, despite this difficulty, he was not placed in SPED because he was not disruptive. He was a very quiet child. He just followed instructions. He was not disrupting the class. He did not bring attention to himself. And so he was not given any special services. Okay. Most likely, Juan has intellectual disability. He could also have language disability. But like so many other children and so many other teens in correctional setting, he has remained undiagnosed, and therefore he has remained unhelped. After Juan left school, he had no meaningful occupation. Initially, he stayed home, playing all day, and as he grew older and became more independent, he went out more and more to play with neighborhood children, some of whom were also out of school. His Lola was very concerned. However, because she was working hard to earn a living for both of them, she could not supervise him closely. Because Juan was so innocent and naive, he was influenced by his peers to steal, to smoke, and later to use drugs. Eventually, Juan was arrested for drug possession. When brought to jail, he was asked to sign a confession. He did it. Why? Because he couldn't read. He became a resident at the correctional center, sharing a cell with 30 other teens for a cell meant for much fewer people. He would sleep on a piece of cardboard on the floor, and he had no visitors the whole time he was in the center. He had no trusted adult to consult with, no people to learn good things from, no support to help him make sense of what was going on in his life. Once again, he was left alone. just like when his mother left him, just like when the educational system did not serve his special needs, just like when his Lola was struggling to earn a living for him and could not supervise. In the correction center, Juan went through the motions of every day. There was a television set outside their cell, but they had to take turns standing at the only window in the cell to be able to watch it. They were allowed in the indoor courtyard an hour each day, as long as the weather was fine, as long as the center was not busy with any visitors or special activities. Some of his co-residents were taking classes through the Alternative Learning System or ALS. However, Juan could not join because his academic skills were so low. There was no teacher available who would work with him individually. Once again, Juan had no meaningful occupation to engage in. His physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual skills and health slowly but surely deteriorated. When we start offered OT services in the center, Juan was always present during the monthly sessions. He never seemed distracted, but he didn't understand most of what was going on. When we were asking him questions, he would be unable to reply. He would smile at us. He would not be able to process the activity or answer any of the questions that we asked him. Nevertheless, he was always cheerful. He always would tell us that his happiest time in the center was when we came because he said we taught him new things and we listened to what he was saying. Juan had a lot of difficulty processing language, answering questions, and reflecting on his actions and plans. For example, when we asked him what he wanted to be, he said he wanted to become a doctor. When we asked him, what obstacles do you think are going to be in your way that you need to overcome in order to reach your dream, he could not identify that his inability to read and write would be something that needs to be addressed. Juan stayed in the correction center for more than a year. He ended up staying in the correction center longer than his sentence because there were delays and long durations between court hearings. It took another 6 months for the social workers to find his mom, and finally they released him to her custody. The last we heard, he was not living with her anymore. Is he back with his Lola? Is he back on the streets? Is he back doing drugs? Could someone have taken him under their wings and taught him meaningful and useful skills so that he can earn a living? Will we see him back in the correction center after a few months? These are questions we may never have answer to.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Jam. So, what is the reality in the life of Juan? Okay, in this part, I will be talking about the state of correctional centers in the Philippines and how Restart is doing its part. Okay. Currently, we have Bahay Pag-asa. All right, so Bahay Pag-asa is under Republic Act 10630. So it is a general term that we use for youth rehabilitation centers. So what you see here are the expected standards for Bahay Pag-asa. So ideally, although this is very ideal, there should be one social worker per 25 youth. There should be a multidisciplinary team with an individualized rehabilitation program. So we're talking about guidance counselors, working with social workers, working with a medical doctor, and the last one is one bed per resident, nutritious meals, and personal supplies. All right. So the reality, though, is as of 2018 to 2019, only 8 out of 55 units are accredited. So what does it say about the rest of the 47 units? To quote Ms. Tricia Oko, she was saying some were worse in prisons. They have no programs at all. So prisons sometimes can be the most unsuccessful institution to carry out their actual purpose of rehabilitating the convicts to eventually become law-abiding citizens and productive members of the society. Okay, so in the next slide, these are articles of how prisons look like or correctional centers look like in the Philippines. just to give you an overview. In the next part, this is the factors. These are the factors that Juan is currently experiencing. Imagine you are Juan, you are living under these conditions. Every day you feel suffocated because you live in a place that is overcrowded, unsanitary, chaotic, noisy. You don't have enough food, so you're hungry. And above all that, you're not really doing anything. You're just in your cell most of the time. You are unoccupied. So, as OTs, we see these conditions as great factors in affecting the mental health of those in correctional facilities. So, what is our role as OTs? Where do we come in? Ultimately, our role is to empower and instill hope with our ability to use occupations for a person to have a sense of purpose. And one of the values that we use in Restart is occupational justice. So as OTs, we believe that we have this perspective that they are so individuals with rights. Rights to participate in meaningful activities, rights to gain access to equal opportunities, rights to have equal life chances. This is what we believe in Restart. To introduce to you to our modules, okay, so like what I said earlier, in Restart, we see them as individuals. So we see them as individuals with past, a present, and a future. So our program is designed to target to process rather each phases of their life. So in the past module, we teach about the self, knowing others, knowing their strengths, their weaknesses, processing the experiences because commonly these experiences are not processed. The history of how they use drugs, how they were introduced to drugs. It's not processed at all most of the time. Not saying everyone, and how to make decisions. In the present module, these are the skills that they are most likely to use in the present. So how to be resilient, how to deal with conflicts, processing their current emotions, and in the future module, we talk about the skills that they can use when they go out of the correctional settings. So how to set goals, how to establish new and healthy relationships, and even finding a job. So in the next few slides, I will be showing you the actual pictures of the youth that we serve in one of the correctional centers here in Manila. Okay, there. So that part, you can see that they have these popsicle sticks. That's part of the goal setting module, I think, where they are making a tower, planning how to make a tower. In the next picture, this is part of the next picture is part of the recreation room where we donated board games so they can have something to use. They have something to use in their free time. And in the next part, I believe this is a picture of one of our special activities where a pastor came in and prayed for the youth that we serve. And the last picture, oh no, that's not the last picture. Okay, so this one is part of the small group activity. So the usual setup is we do a lecture, didactics, and then it's followed by a small group activity for application. Okay, and then the rest are the examples of their worksheets and their out and their works. Okay, so what is OT for mental health in correctional settings? Primarily, we use occupations, but we also use the following skills to contribute to mental health in correctional settings: empathy or interpersonal skills. So, what did we learn from this experience? As OTs, we are in a unique position to advocate and support for them since they are a vulnerable population. For the Restart team believes that we can instill hope as we listen to their narratives as we attend to their needs through giving gifts, special programs, as we give them a sense of control. Through simple decision making, we can advocate for and support for them. For the system, we believe that having a more rehabilitative approach in the correctional setting may aid them in community reintegration. This is our greatest hope. Our greatest hope is reducing the number of detainees returning back to the correctional setting that we serve. So let's go back to Juan. Remember Juan? Remember how we are left with so many questions about where he is now? We may never know the answer, but we just want to share with you our dream for Juan. Our dream for Juan is to successfully reintegrate in the society. That means that he will not go back to the correctional setting. He will be employed, he will be leaning on God, he will contribute to the society. He has new and healthy relationships, he has good work habits. In short, he will be able to navigate through life. This is the story that Restart wants for his life through the help of occupational therapists. One of the main challenges of youth in correctional settings are with the lack of occupation, disruption of routines. Most youth are demotivated. They feel hopeless and helpless. For them, it feels like this is actually coming from a quote, an actual quote that I heard from one of the youth there. He says that they are in a cycle where it's impossible to get out. They feel stuck. But as the quote says, in occupational therapy, um, we can turn hopeless into hope. We can turn can't into can. We can turn impossible into possible. And what Miss Mini mentioned a while ago, there's still really a lot to explore for OT and mental health. That's all for us. Thank you very much. I hope that you learn um, what OTs can do inside correctional settings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jam and Anna. I like how I like the vision also that you presented of like for Juan, he has healthy relationship, he has a future, he can be able to work. Because like that's also what we want for the people that we're serving, right? We want them to have that hope for more than like what they can feel right now. Like what you mentioned, parang one of the persons you were it felt like they were just in a cycle, and we want to be able to help them to dream for something bigger than just the cycle that they're at now. So thank you so much for that. So for now, what we're gonna do, we're gonna have a short forum for just short question and answer for both March PSS with Minnie and now for Anna and Jam. So for our participants, if you have any questions, if you have um, anything you want to share, also you can send it in through the chat, and then we can ask our speakers about it. Okay. So for now, we have one question here for we have one question here for Jam. Okay. It said here, how do you delineate our role, so our role as an occupational therapist, with that of like social workers or other professionals? And how would you advocate for the role of OT, provided that we're not usually seen in that setting, especially like with a correctional setting? It's not something like so well known, right? So how would we advocate for our role as OTs there, and how can we delineate our role from other professionals in that setting?
All right. Okay. Thank you for that question. To be honest, there was actually a time where the restart team is actually trying to go through that. How do we really try to establish and introduce our role in the correctional setting? So the result of the discussion was, as OTs, we are there more as our role is about really trying to teach the skills that they need inside and outside of the correctional setting. So this is really about the occupations and really enabling the occupational participation. So I think that's the greatest factors, the skills training. Ma'am Anna, you want to add?
Um, I guess if you're working with pediatric clients, so The terms that would be more familiar would be executive function skills. These are the skills that the teens who are in correction setting are sorely lacking in. They don't know how to regulate their emotions. They don't know how to control their impulses. They don't know how to negotiate with their barkada who's, influencing them to do bad things. And so what we're trying to do is to teach them these skills because it's not, I think most of us learned this through the years when our parents give us feedback, when our teachers give us feedback, but not all of them have that feedback from their families. And so we're having to really overtly teach them so that when they go back, even inside this correction setting, when they go back to society, they can use those skills so that they don't go back to a life of crime. They don't go back to the drugs and going back to the correction setting.
Thank you for that. I think even like it's in literature, it really does say that for teens, especially those with history of like substance abuse, is really executive functions that we really need to look at. I think Minnie wants to add in a thought into this question. Um, yeah.
Actually, Jam, I also have that question even to myself. Am I a social worker because I'm working with these people? Now I am looking for beneficiaries who have mental health problems. What am I doing now? So I always remind myself it's occupation, you know, because if we don't think about occupation, then you'd lose your focus and you'll be doing other things. Like what people say, OTs now are a jack of all trade, and we're not, we might not be a master of anything. But yes, that will be true if we don't focus on occupation. Yeah, what is it that we really want to do? So we just have to, we can do so many things, but we have to know why we're doing this. And it's the participation of these individuals in their occupations. Tama ba, Miss Anne? I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think also Sir Mike wants to add into this conversation.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your very enlightening presentations, Mini, Anna, and Jam. I think the reason why there is still many OTs, or there are very few OTs in going into disaster management and correction settings and other role emerging practices is because for the longest time, I think occupational therapy has been associated with medical practice because that's historically that's what happened. We really came from that. But as we see, occupation is not limited to rehabilitation or the body or the physical body. Many OTs now are looking into the societal factors that really affect occupations, and I think it is important that OTs look into that lens. And so we have this issue amongst us because we were trained, educated that okay, OTs are really allied medical professionals or health professionals, when in fact in other countries, OTs are now going into social care. I don't think the social workers, because there are a lot of social issues. So social workers would actually appreciate, I would just like to think that social workers would appreciate us helping them in their work because there are just so many multi-layered social issues. And I think we have a special place um, in that space where we can actually help provide what we can for them. And I think what Restart and MHPSS are doing are really, really good. And I think you need to be heard more. That's what I wanted to add. So we thank you for just being here and sharing your experiences. Thank you.
We also have a comment here from Tess. So she was saying that it's very challenging given our emerging role for an OT in this setting, right? And then she said that as OTs, the services that we offer are so varied and limitless. So we have to be clear with our roles and the tasks that we can't like overlap with other professionals. We have our own unique role. There. So thank you so much for that. We also have a another question here. In relation to restart. So I think this can be for Jam. It said, is there a way to contact restart if you need volunteers? Like, is there an initiative for OT students or other OTs uh, where they can have like a placement in correctional settings, or they can have like volunteer work in correctional settings?
May I answer that?
Yes, sure.
Yes. Okay. So initially, when we were thinking of restart, we were thinking that it would be such a nice placement for interns, right? So initially, I was talking with UP about this, but the concern from City Hall or the local government unit is that one, the interns' ages would be really close to the age of the teens in correction setting. So they're concerned about love affairs developing, friendships going overboard and things like that. And also their concern was also from the UP side or the university side was that the interns might not be emotionally ready to deal with the very frustrating. It can be very frustrating to deal with the system and with the problems that we hear about when we're working with the teens in delinquent settings. Ano? And so right now, what we have is programs. We're willing to train. We're willing to work with people who are graduates already. In the future, that might change, but right now, from the local government unit, they won't allow interns to be the ones to go in. They want licensed therapists to be the ones working with the corrections teams, and that makes sense, right? But hopefully, in the future, it will change because internship is such a precious time for exposure to different types of settings, and so we'll see. But right now, it's with licensed OTs.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
I think like when you said it's hard to try to find like in correctional settings. Even when I started in drug rehabilitation, it was hard to like have to deal with the system. And me being a licensed OT, I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So I feel like I get that part. Are there like ways now maybe they can get mentorship instead of like actually having to go into that correctional placement setting? Is there a way for them to get mentorship from Restart if they want to get into this area?
I'll answer it, Mom Anna. Right now, we are still in the process of creating the formalities, honestly, of the agreements, how to, if there would ever be a formalized mentorship, what type of program or what type of things or tasks that they will be doing. So for now, I think just keep up, just wait for any updates, but for now, wala pa po. Yeah, there's none yet for now.
Okay, thank you so much. But like what Sir Mike was mentioning in the chat, there are items in correctional OT items in correctional settings. Um, yeah. So like, do you know if there are any?
There
Um,
might have been before because this
mhm.
is not a new setting.
Yeah.
Yung time nila Ma'am Tess,
Yeah.
marami mga mental health A lot of mental health practice was going on. And they were doing drug rehab and, correction setting. So there might have been items before, but it's possible that because of the number of years that have lapsed, that item might have been canceled already. So we don't know right now. I don't think, I'm not aware of any. And so maybe in the future we can advocate for that.
Yeah.
They need OT. They really need
We
OTs in
do.
the correctional setting. There's just
Yeah.
no way around it. They
Yeah.
need to have OTs on board so that the clients are engaged and occupied, right?
Yeah.
And so, just to add to what Jam said earlier, we don't have anything formal right now. But if you're interested, please do feel free to write us because we want to know how much interest there is and maybe the background of the people who want to know about it. Because really, we envision dreaming big. We want this to be nationwide. That all prisons, all juvenile centers will have occupational therapists serving the teens. Because without that, they're just going to alam niyo yung term na recidivism, they're just going to go out, get back into crime, come back to the center, go out, get back into crime. There's just no way to break the cycle unless we give them these skills. So that's our dream that someday all centers will have OTs.
Yeah. Okay. So we also have a question in relation to like volunteer and stuff for March PSS. So maybe Minnie can answer this. So are there, yeah, so like in relation to like volunteering in correctional settings, are there volunteer positions or like volunteer opportunities for work in Bantayan Island, or are there any OT positions in Cebu area in your place?
Mm, yes, of course. I would love to have volunteers coming to Bantayan. I can, yeah. I need. I'm the only one here in the village, and there are 390 households. Just imagine that, and I have hundreds of children. I have hundreds of teenagers, so I really need help.
Yeah, so grab it that
Yes,
workload, 100, one OTs to like 300,
yes. There's so
90
many,
households. Oh my
but
god.
of course we work in collaboration with social workers, with the community health or the barangay health workers. So you just have you don't you just have to work with the other the other people
Okay.
kasi
One
hindi
more,
kaya.
yeah, one more question na lang po, Minnie. For March PSS and what you're doing, what can you advise to occupational therapists or OT students who want to venture into what you're doing now with like MHPSS and community-based rehabilitation?
Well, for to be honest, yung mga community the CBR settings that we have now, quite a number actually clinical outposts, because if you go back to the WHO CBR matrix,
Mhm.
rehabilitation is only 10% of that. So there is health, there is education, there is livelihood. It's actually very interesting. There's empowerment and all that. So there's so much that you can do in the community. And probably if more of us will go into community occupational therapy, we can be heard by the government, and then we can have probably plantillas. Um, the other day, I was asked by the local government unit that if if they can actually open an OT position, and I said, of course, yeah, you should. And I think there's already an item for that.
Okay.
And I think there is, because I know of one occupational therapist who's working under the Department of Social Welfare.
Mm.
And that's actually very good, because that can actually also cover the jail and that. But again, under social welfare, it's okay for now. We can be under them, and then when we have proven ourselves, then they will open opportunities for us to be, to be there, to have an
To
item
have our
there.
own, ano. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-mm.
So for final words for March PSS and Restart, can you just direct us to like how we can contact you? Do you have a Facebook page or your email so that we can our participants can contact you if they want to partner up with you or if they want to know more of what you do?
Yes, they can email me, or they can contact March MHPSS. We have a Facebook. Ira, can you please
Okay.
type
So yeah.
the, yeah,
Yeah, we'll send in the link to your Facebook page through our chat. What about
yes.
for Restart? How can we contact Restart? What's your
Okay, sa Facebook, we have a page. So just look for Restart Occupational Therapy, and you can follow that page for information. You can send us a message there. And I believe the email address is also there.
okay?
So
So Facebook
feel
page as
free to
well.
contact us.
Okay.
Restart Occupational Therapy on Facebook.
Okay, so we'll send that in as well on the chat for our participants to check out. Again, thank you, Minnie, Anna, and Jam for your time and for your
You're
insight
welcome. You're
into
welcome.
this. We learned so many things, and we look forward to the other programs that you have in store. Thank you so much. So that ends our first part of the program with our local speakers. And that ends our forum as well. Again, we just like to remind everyone to keep your microphones off and your video camera off throughout the presentations so that there isn't any extra feedback. Yeah, and then we'd also again like to thank our partner organizations today, without whom this event would not be possible. So we'd like to thank March PSS, Restart, Open Arms Organization, JCI Batangas Balisong, Zero Kilometro, and Parola. So now we'll move on to the second part of our program, which would be featuring our international speakers. So our first speaker would be Dr. Ki Hian Lim. He is a lecturer in occupational therapy at Brunel University in London, UK, and in various universities in the UK and European Masters in OT. He has led several occupational therapy programs in the academic setting and in the community. He has vast clinical, research, and teaching experience that includes promoting cultural competency in practice, occupation and mental health recovery, the Kawa River Model, disability sports, loneliness and disconnection, student mental health, and well being. So, Dr. Kihan Lim sent in a pre recorded video for his presentation today, which we will be giving a preview of. The full presentation has been sent to your emails for your viewing. So, to talk with us today regarding understanding the relevance of mental health in society and appreciation of the role that occupational therapists can play in times of uncertainty. Let's all welcome Dr. Ki Hian Lim.
Hello, my name is Dr. Kian, and I want to thank the Filipino Mental Health Occupational Therapy group for asking me to speak about this topic about understanding the relevance of mental health in society. And I'm also going to touch on the role of occupational therapists in terms of what they can play or what they can do in these times of uncertainty, but also in terms of mental health. Mental health, as I mentioned before, is that there is a lot of stigma and a lot of fear attached to it. And of course, there is lots of contextual influences. So society, culture, family, communities, education, peer groups, our beliefs, how we are socialized, the media that, whether it's social media or the press, newspapers, they can all influence our beliefs, values, and attitudes. And of course, affect the behaviors that we exhibit. And this kind of creates problems for society and its perception of mental health issues and how it's viewed and understood and how people respond to people with mental health conditions. So if you think about the discrimination that exists, it is often both covert and overt. Just looking at how mental health is portrayed in TV programs, in the newspapers and social media, you can notice that it's often very biased and unbalanced. So these are just two examples of some newspaper headlines that I've recently found. Yes, they're not necessarily from the Philippines, but you can see some of the kind of messages that are being portrayed. Get the violent crazies off our streets, or 1,200 killed by mental health patients. These sensationalized headlines, unfortunately, portray a very negative view of mental health. And it is not surprising that people with mental health issues are reluctant to admit to it, or families where they have members with mental health issues are reluctant to seek help or talk more openly about what's going on for them. Okay, I think mental health is much more than just thinking about the condition, defining the whole person. The same as if you had diabetes, you wouldn't say that diabetes is the whole person, it defines the whole person. Actually, I think we have to look beyond mental health to understand actually that particular individual is still, for example, a brother or a sister or a parent or a child or a music fan or a sports supporter or you know, or has other productive roles. So that mental health should be a diagnosis, a part of them, but not all of them. And that is the approach that we need to really think about when we are working and considering mental health. That mental health should not totally define the person. So when you think about mental health and physical health, there's often a strong relationship. And sometimes people do consider these as quite separate. And I think that's a mistake to do so. So there is a big relationship, interrelated relationship between mental and physical health. And you can't really consider one without the other, and vice versa. Whether it's physical health and mental health, or mental health and physical health. We need to really think about it holistically in terms of health and illness, and that it has an impact on each other. So, for example, around 25% of people with physical illness, for example, fallen over, cardiac condition, or stroke, also as a consequence of them acquiring this illness, develop maybe some mental health issues like depression and anxiety. And it's not sufficient to just deal with physical issues or to provide them physical rehabilitation. Actually, you need to also pay attention to whether there are mental health issues that they experience that needs to be dealt with and also worked through. Often patients are asked about their how often are patients asked about their emotional and psychological well-being when they're going through, say, a physical illness? And I think we can be quite rigid in physical health, and that we might be talking about people's functional difficulties, the challenges they face, and then forget to pay attention to maybe the emotional and psychological impacts of their illness upon their lives as a whole. And also for occupational therapists or for health professionals working within these physical settings, it's really important for them to pay attention to how the psychological well-being or mental health diagnosis of the individual patients might have an impact on the way they respond in assessments that we do or in the interventions that we offer. Because actually the results that we get as health professionals might be colored, or they might be biased, or they might be influenced by underlying mental health issues that the individual patient is experiencing too. And this might then give us inaccurate assessments of how they are performing. So over 50% of all cases of depression actually go unrecognized by medical staff. Patients and clients, they might be reluctant, not clients, but clinicians, they might be reluctant to talk about what's going on for them psychologically or emotionally because they might feel that we are not ready to listen to them. Okay, and some symptoms of depression can actually overlap in other ways. As I said before, they can cause some of the assessments we do to be inaccurate, and that it might be the depression that leads to someone feeling tired or not motivated, and so on. And this might impact upon their physical recovery and rehabilitation. In other case, the issue of depression might not be discussed because it might be just seen as a natural part of the illness and therefore not worth treating. And this is a really unhelpful way of understanding the recovery process that people go through, the rehabilitation progress. We need to make sure that we treat each and every single patient in a very holistic and inclusive manner and consider all aspects of their health and the impact of their condition, their physical condition on all aspects of their health and what we can do to help them to recover in a full and holistic manner. Now, I don't know how aware you are, but in many hospitals, for patients over the age of 65, they might very well experience also a range of mental health conditions alongside the physical conditions they have. So up to 60% of older adults or older age people have or will develop a mental health order during their admission. And this is compared to 16% of older adults in the general community. So it's about 4 times as high. The most common disorders in older age hospitals in terms of patients are that they might experience dementia, delirium, or depression. So these are statistics that we need to pay attention to when you're working with older adults, when you have older adults that are coming into hospital. Are we looking beyond the fact that they're in hospitals because they've fallen over or that they are they have a stroke or they have Parkinson's? Are we paying attention to, for example, the isolation they experience? Are we paying attention to the depression they have? Are we looking at other factors that are really crucial to them making a recovery? The same applies, I guess, when we look at university schools and education. I think it's really important to note that, when you go to school or when you go to university, it's more than just the good grades, and it's more than just doing well in exams. Wherever you are, whether it's university or just starting school, whether it's junior school or secondary school, there are issues around transition. There are issues around a sense of belonging. There are issues around friendship and peer support. There are issues around sports, activities, things you do that you enjoy. And yes, of course, there are exam and assessment periods, but actually we need to, as a whole, consider the importance of good mental health and well-being for all the university students that we have, the children that we have that go to school, and how the education system either promotes or supports this or how it does not. So these are some questions I'm going to leave with you to kind of really think about wherever you are, whether you are professional in these issues. Then the impact on mental health in terms of COVID and so on. So I think one of the most worrying aspects or impacts of pandemic is the impact it has on people's mental health. Irrespective of whether you're a child, you're a teenager, or you're an adult, or you're someone with a physical health condition and you've had to chill away from other people, or whether you're a health professional working and trying to support people during the pandemic. Actually, I think lots of people have recently experienced many issues around their mental health and needing that support to keep them well and keep them going. In fact, my own research more recently around people shielding during COVID, there are lots of issues around isolation. There are lots of issues around loneliness. There are lots of issues around losing the support they would otherwise get because services that they used to access, both services that support their physical and mental health, have been affected. And so subsequently, their own health and well-being has been affected. So I think Dr. Joshua Laurentis, Assistant Director of Department of Health in the Philippines in Zamboanga City, warned that the pandemic is causing major mental health crisis in the Philippines, and that in fact COVID has led to lots of job losses, financial problems for people, and this has affected their mental health, physical health. It's led to psychological stress, fear, depression, and even suicide. And he's emphasized the need for individuals to be more open about their issues, their problems, and to seek the help they need. But of course, this is also in light of what I've said before about discrimination and stigma. So we have to be really careful, and also we have to be careful about the newspapers and social media, how they portray mental health in this time, because they can be very helpful in promoting a positive message, or they can be very unhelpful in creating negative perspectives around mental health and about reducing the stress. Okay, so similarly, I've included some YouTube clips and some online resources, which I hope you will have a look at, which may be helpful. And then, of course, we know in the Philippines that, like many countries, the Philippines also is susceptible to maybe situations or incidents of maybe disaster and the consequence. So, for example, I was looking at some data, and it said that you had Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, where about 80,000 people required both physical and psychological help, mainly in terms of psychological help, post-traumatic stress disorder. And very recently, only maybe a week ago, you had Typhoon Ulysses, and that hit the Philippines in the 11th of November. And no doubt there will be lots of implications from the typhoon in terms of physical health around, and also around dislocation and around people getting their lives back together again, and the psychological impact. So the psychological and mental health support is key in terms of disaster relief programs. And we need to make sure that these are in place, not just the physical rehabilitation and recovery. Okay, so mental health practitioners need the support of and health professionals play a key role in things like housing adaptation, retraining and employment initiatives, community support, but also working in areas like PTSD and also occupational-based rehab. So there are lots of areas that health professionals can focus on and look into, which are key to working with people in the areas of disaster relief and in terms of rehabilitation and so on. So if you look at this particular diagram here, you will notice that these are linked to mental health recovery. And there are concepts that people with mental health issues have mentioned about really important things that support them within their recovery. And this includes things like hope, support, empowerment, inclusion, employment and meaningful activities, self-help, education, medication, and spirituality. And actually, if we look at ourselves as occupational therapists, those of us who are occupational therapists, then many of these key concepts or these common factors that are highlighted by people with mental health conditions are actually in line with what our core values are as occupational therapists, and that we actually are able in many ways to support our patients in this particular way, or our clients in this particular way, in that we can offer them the support, we can offer them the hope that actually there is a future. We can empower them and help them be included within society and groups. We can help them explore the meaningful activities that promote their well-being. We can look at opportunities for employment. We can help in setting up support groups and collaboration in terms of providing knowledge and education so that they understand their mental health conditions and how to best support themselves. Obviously, we can be involved in monitoring their health, their medication and treatment. But if we take a holistic approach, there is a lot that as occupational therapists we can do. Now, in terms of looking at the role of occupational therapists, I think that actually occupational therapists have a massive role to play. As I showed you in the diagram before, I think lots of those key aspects are relatable to what we hold as occupational therapists as our core values. So as occupational therapists, we can be involved in supporting, promoting mental health and recovery. And also in occupational therapy, we have this concept called occupational justice, And this emphasizes the need for individuals and communities to be able to participate in things that are meaningful, things that are important to them, which will help maintain their health and their well-being. And so we have a role to play in trying to kind of make sure that we support the people we work with in this way, in creating opportunities, in challenging any injustices that exist, and to kind of enable them to be included within society and in what other areas that they are part of in their communities, for example, or in schools or in their workplace. I think we also have a key role to play in many areas around disaster relief, in terms of university and schools, in terms of community projects, rehabilitation, but also in terms of mental health, social justice and equality, and to promote occupational justice. I think we need to break free as occupational therapists from maybe our traditional ideas and views on where we should be working and what we should be doing, and branch out and actually to form alliances and work with our communities or work with the mental health charities or other charities that exist to kind of really fight discrimination and stigma and support social inclusion. Now, in the Philippines, I have been told that there are around only 45 occupational therapists that work within mental health, compared to, I guess, around 750 psychiatrists. I think the 750 for psychiatrists is a figure higher than the one I showed you earlier at the beginning, because obviously that was in 2016. But still, this is really far too low. So with a current population in the Philippines of 109 million, if we look at 45 occupational therapists working in mental health, then actually there is one mental health occupational therapist per 2.39, almost 2.39 million persons. And this is far, far too low. And I think that we really need to challenge this. And we need to really find ways of encouraging a whole range of health professionals, but in particular, as you can see, occupational therapists to work in mental health, and to help them understand the kind of wonderful opportunity that they can contribute and make a difference in terms of this particular area of health provision. So here are two YouTube clips that I hope that you will look at in your own time. They all relate to mental health, but they are actually personal accounts of individuals talking about what their mental health is like, the impact it has on their lives. And I think the more we are able to talk and freely discuss mental health, the better it is. The more it becomes normal to discuss and understand, and the more it will then challenge stigma and discrimination that exists. So please have a look at these in your own time. And I just wanted to kind of finish off my presentation with one little thing, which is about looking after your own mental health. So I think all of us, whether we're health professionals, whether we are people who are members of the general public, whether we are carers, or whether we are just someone working in the office, I think we all need to look after our own mental health and well-being. So this is my suggestion, that you think of something that you have not done for some time that contributes to your mental health and well-being. And then what I would like you to do is make a plan and schedule to do this within the next 2 weeks. To be
Okay, so I think that's it for Dr. Keegan Lim's presentation. Again, if you haven't received the link to this presentation, please do let us know so we can send you the presentation. Hopefully, for our forum later, he'll be able to come. I think we've already contacted him regarding the forum. So if you have any questions regarding his presentation, please do let us know via the chat so that we can collate it and then ask it later on during our forum. So for now, let's move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Madeline Duncan. She retired in December 2018 as Emeritus Associate Professor of Occupational Therapy at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. So spanning a career of 45 years, her professional and research contributions have been in theorizing and applying occupation in the context of chronic poverty and disability, community-based rehabilitation, disability inclusive community development, and occupational therapy education. So, to talk with us today on spirituality as an occupation to promote mental health, let's all welcome Dr. Eve Madeline Duncan.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to screen share and see if I can put my PowerPoint up. I'm just not seeing it on here at the moment. I won't be long. I'm just trying to locate my my PowerPoint.
It's okay. No problem. No worries.
Is everybody able to see that?
We're still unable to see it. But I think you were. Let's try to troubleshoot this as well.
It's on my screen at the moment.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Not yet. I think. Okay, there. Yes, now we can see it. Yes.
Good. Thank you. So greetings to all my wonderful colleagues and friends in the Philippines. I'm really impressed with the program this morning. It is, as always, very inspiring to see the quality and impactful service of occupational therapists in your wonderful country. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm going to be a little bit more philosophical than the speakers up to this point. I'm going to focus, like Dr. Lim suggested, a little bit more on you as, or we as mental health professionals or as occupational therapists ourselves. So going to speak in this presentation. I'm going to describe briefly the difference between spirituality and religion. Then I'm going to briefly just run through the social determinants of mental health and distinguish between preoccupation and occupation, briefly cover the OT literature on spirituality, and then use a case story to demonstrate the psychospiritual integration framework before going on to spirituality and mental health self-care, and then just recommending the link between spirituality and virtual practice wisdom as an OT. Now, when it comes to the difference between a religion and spirituality, I think Haile Selassie said it best when he said spirituality does not come from religion, it comes from our soul. He argues that we must stop confusing religion and spirituality because religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals that have been created by humans, which are supposed to help people grow spirituality. But due to human imperfection, religion has become corrupt, political, divisive, and a tool for power struggle. Spirituality is not theology or ideology. It is simply a way of life, pure and original. It was given by the Most High of creation. Spirituality is a network linking us to the Most High, the universe, and to each other. A religion then is a collective formalized system of faith with clearly defined beliefs, um, and religion informs adherents what to believe about the divine, how and why. Religion may have a specific god or numerous gods and involves religious practices, symbols, rituals, forms of worship and prayer, all of which may comprise occupations that hold meaning and purpose in terms of a person's faith. Mental health, religion, and spirituality are often viewed by clinicians and patients as separate. There is, however, a growing recognition that religion and spirituality may in fact serve protective and healing roles in recovering from emotional suffering. The mental health literature indicates that patients regard spirituality as a source of giving and receiving love and care, whereas health professionals regard it as a means for patients to receive support and manage their symptoms. While spirituality may include adherence to a particular faith or religious system, it goes beyond religious affiliation because it is an individual's personal way of reaching out to their innermost self, to their fellow human beings, and to the divine. Strictly speaking, my title isn't quite correct because based on the definition of human occupation, spirituality is not an occupation. It is an inherent human characteristic akin to emotions and cognition. It is expressed through qualities of the human spirit and soul, also sometimes referred to as the human heart, such as hope in and reverence of the transcendent, creativity, the search for valued relationships, and most importantly, the search for wholeness and meaning and purpose in life. For those with no conception of supernatural belief, spirituality may relate to the notions of a motivating force, which involves the integration of the dimension of body, mind, and spirit. Individuals faced my cat's decided to join. I'm just taking her off the table. She's decided to join the talk and has knocked over a cup of coffee. It's wonderful to have our animals involved. Anyway, it is therefore important, where was I? The individuals faced with ill health and adverse life circumstances often search for meaning and purpose to understand or interpret their situation. It is therefore important for occupational therapists to take people's spirituality and mental health seriously, irrespective of which domain of practice they work in. And I think that was what Dr. Lim was also arguing for. So spirituality, mental health, and mindfulness have become very important contemporary topics. There's, for example, a webinar series that you can dial up on spirituality and mental health that's been running since October this year with the Partnership Center. There are multiple journals articles in OT Mental Health on spirituality. The Journal of Spirituality and Mental Health provides really important information. The link between spirituality and mental health argues really that spirituality involves, amongst others, mindfulness as an antidote to mental ill health. Mindfulness is the idea of learning how to be fully present and engaged in the moment, to be aware of your thoughts and feelings without distraction or judgment. So I think this has already been covered adequately by the previous speakers, but I'm really just going to reiterate how very stressful contemporary society is. Maintained since 1947 by the members of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the doomsday clock is a symbol that represents the likelihood of man-made global disaster. In January this year, the Bulletin, which currently includes 30 Nobel laureates, moved the doomsday clock from 2 minutes to midnight in 2018 to 100 seconds to midnight. They explained that humanity continues to face two two simultaneous existential dangers: nuclear war and climate change, that are compounded by a threat multiplier, cyber-enabled information warfare that undercuts society's ability to respond and to cope. We are indeed living in mentally troublesome times. Violence and mass human migration is increasing as poverty and inequality gaps widen, placing increasing pressure on mental health services in countries across the world. In driving knowledge proliferation through artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, the fourth industrial revolution is accelerating cyber communication and bombarding humans with information. The current COVID pandemic is illustrating our reliance on the internet to stay connected and do our work. In the midst of all of these and other social problems is the individual human, overwhelmed by existential threats and desperately, desperately lonely. Loneliness is a feeling of insignificance and meaninglessness that never goes away, even if you are apparently successful and surrounded by family and friends. It is particularly acute when you are facing some natural or man-made disaster and living on the margins of society with no hope, dignity, or the resources to meet your basic human needs. Loneliness is one of the most universal sources of human suffering today. I think Dr. Lim also alluded to it. This is particularly so in a world that rewards competitive individualism while claiming to have a culture of equality, unity, and community. Loneliness is very often a root cause for depression, suicide, and substance abuse. In short, people are alienated from themselves, from others, and from their inner spirituality. With this in mind, let's think a little bit about the existential meaninglessness, the loneliness that people experience. For some, their loneliness and their emptiness leads to a reactionary lifestyle filled with frantic occupations. If you just look at the activities for mental health groups, wonderful ideas, but there we have to guard against reintroducing just occupation for the sake of occupation. We've got to be very mindful about which occupations we choose and why we choose them. Humans panic when there is nothing or no one around to distract them. We become preoccupied with ourselves and the anxieties and hostilities created by an incomprehensible world. We run from loneliness, yielding to an inexhaustible need to be entertained, kept busy, and socially entangled. Mindless distractions, many expressed through our occupations, place unrealistic expectations on substitute love objects. We anxiously cling to the illusion that someone or something else out there will fix our problems. Staying within ourselves, with ourselves, in peaceful silence and self-acceptance, just being without doing anything, is very difficult. For others in resource poor and occupationally deprived or disrupted environments, boredom highlights their loneliness and even dulls their capacity for creativity. Distressed humans take flight into mental illness. For some, religion serves as a source of comfort, while for others, it becomes a source of delusional thinking. Recovery from mental illness is a personal journey, one which benefits from a spiritual awakening, a rebirth of the relationship between ourselves and the transcendent, the eternal. During recovery, people discover that no human achievement, no person, no community, or even occupation can meet their deepest inner craving for internal unity and wholeness. This is a craving that can only be satisfied by doing some personal spiritual homework. With this in mind, we may have to reconsider the wisdom of suggesting that people engage in so-called, in inverted commas, meaningful and purposeful occupations, when what they may need is just to be, to be still and do nothing except listen to the comforting, restorative, small, still voice in their inner being, the transcendent, their soul. Mindfulness teaches people to be present in the moment of doing, to curtail their preoccupations so that they can be still within their being. It is from this inner place of peace that renewed creativity emerges. The Canadian model of occupational therapists have recognized the centrality of spirituality. They depict spirituality as an essential practice domain. Occupational therapists respond to disruption in well-being and quality of life by mobilizing people's spiritual coping strategies in order to support and restore their sense of meaning and purpose. The psychospiritual integration framework was proposed by Kang in 2003, was developed after a comprehensive review of OT literature relating to spirituality. The 6 dimensions of the psychospiritual integration framework are meaning, connectedness, transcendence, becoming, being, and centeredness. The absence of one or more of these dimensions leads to spiritual deprivation and a subsequent loss of mental well-being. In the PSI, spiritual competence when delivering care requires the health professional firstly to develop their own understanding and their own experience of spirituality. Embedding spirituality into OT practice includes the provision of a holistic, person-centered approach facilitated through an effective therapeutic relationship that helps the person process their suffering, that helps the person seek and to connect and reconnect with a community where they experience a sense of belonging. And it also helps people develop coping strategies to improve the quality of their life. I'm now briefly going to share a case story of work that I've been doing for many, many years in a deep rural district in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, focusing on occupation-based disability inclusive development and CBR. The people in this community are from the Baka tribe, and they follow a syncretic faith combining Christianity with ancestral worship. This is a sculpture that one of our clients, a profoundly disabled person with cerebral palsy, sculpted this, where he depicts on the left-hand picture people in the living realm in helping a person with illness, and supporting, being part of a sense of community. And on the right-hand side, he depicts behind all of this are the deceased ancestors that are ready to receive or to assist or guide those on in the living realm with guidance on how to act. The ancestors are seen then as connections between the living and with God. So their syncretic system of faith and spirituality serves as a very, very important foundation for making sense of suffering. Sipo, we've used the photographs with permission, was aged 28 and a cattle herder, caring for his father, who was visually impaired and frail. Sipo went to Johannesburg to look for a job. While he was there, he was in an altercation and sustained a head injury, which resulted in ataxia and mobility impairment. When we met him in his dwelling in this remote rural area, we discovered him lying in the bed that you can see there, with bottles and of alcohol strewed on the floor. He was severely depressed and felt that he had no hope. His aspiration was to herd again, and most importantly was to marry one day. When we asked him what his need was, he said, I want to be mobile again. I want to have to engage with a livelihood, and most importantly, bring me a Bible. I need a Bible. Fast forward over a long period of time, it must have taken at least 2 to 3 years, with helping him regain his mobility, working with a community rehab worker in the provision of assistive devices, home exercise programs, securing a disability grant. With the OT, we would only see him once every 3 to 6 months, because we would fly into the area, or rather, I should say, fly to Durban and then drive another 5 hours to get to the area, was that we would have conversations about the meaning of his injury, the strategies that he himself can use to achieve his aspirations. We had conversations on the foundations of his faith. He eventually ended up setting up a shop in his dwelling, using his disability grant to fund the small items that he could sell to the neighbors. He had built a dwelling for a bride. He'd married, and with a child, he was attending church. And most importantly, as a newly disabled person, he was very much more integrated into his community. So what do we understand then about SIPU and the continuum of mental health and illness? When we met him, he was on the left-hand side of the continuum of mental health. He was languishing. He had a very low level of affective well-being. And most certainly, as a clinician, I could diagnose that he had a major depressive episode. He was really needing for us to embark on the PSI process, where goal setting with SIPO explored what was significant for him. The meaning of his impairment and the adverse role of alcohol was discussed. The goals and interests that he wanted to pursue were identified. Connectedness was enabled by facilitating his connection with the community as a newly disabled person. Transcendence occurred when the therapist supported SIPO's mindfulness by supplying a Bible, a means for him to find hope in the midst of his circumstances. His being was affirmed through attentive listening and an affirmation of his dignity by meeting his practical needs. Becoming was facilitated by enabling SIPO to expand his livelihood identity from herder to entrepreneur. Centeredness occurred through SIPO's adaptation to his disability and in finding community in marriage and in his faith. Back then to where I started earlier, we as OTs and as health professionals have to understand our own spirituality. Client-centered practice has been well defined in our profession. The question is really, how do we as mental health therapists carry the burden of reality and the human tragedies that we see in our clients without becoming mentally paralyzed ourselves? How can we as therapists live spiritually authentic and mentally healthy and creative lives in order to serve our clients well? The impact that OT for mental health in Philippines will depend as much on what therapists do, which we've heard wonderful examples of, but also on therapists themselves looking after their own mental health so that they can enable the well-being of their clients. When it is the spirituality of the OT and the spirituality of the client meeting during the client-centered practice approach. We have to practice what we profess. This means nurturing our own spirituality. As OTs, we cannot fix the big wide world with its overwhelming problems. But what we can do is make a difference in our immediate spheres of influence where we find ourselves, or in the theistic worldview, which I subscribe to grow where God has planted us. If our core business is enriching and enabling human doing, being, becoming, and belonging, as Wilcock proposed, then we can indeed counteract loneliness as a major contribution to mental ill health through our own spiritual mindfulness. What does mental health self-care look like? There are many toolkits that are available. The quest for an authentic spirituality is, however, worth the effort, since in the midst of this quest, people find the resilience to replace loneliness with tranquil personal solitude. They discover their capacity for spiritual fortitude in the face of adversity. The more we understand rather than deny our inner struggles, and the more fully we will be able to embrace a prayerful and a genuine life that is also open to others and to the divine, finding there the strength to serve society. It seems to me that one of your Filipino national heroes, Jose Rizal, understood the force of the human heart in shaping human destiny. He says that to live is to be among men, and to be among men is to struggle, a struggle not only with them, but also with oneself, with their passions, but also with one's own. He says that on this battlefield, in his case, resistance, man has no better weapon than his intelligence, but no other force but his heart. Jose Rizal also said that he who does not know how to look back at where he came from will never get to his destination. These are indeed powerful thoughts that I think are well worth reflecting on as a profession. The World Federation recently released an online resource, a really wonderful module on mental health self-care for OTs and other frontline workers. Do yourself a favor, log in, make use of it, look after your own mental health. So in closing notes, my main ideas then are, first of all, that cultivating spirituality is a developmental process extending throughout a lifetime. Spiritual growth is not automatic. We can be mature in years, but not in our spirit. To secure spiritual wisdom, one must consciously seek it out. It is possible, even in the midst of harrowing life circumstances, to be spiritually at peace. That is the core of mental health, and we can help our clients discover this truth. Spirituality unfolds in community with ourselves, with significant others, but most importantly, in community with God. Community shapes the framework within which our spirit grows. Be mindful, therefore, about preoccupations and occupations of people around you, or even the occupations that you prescribe to your clients. Seek out resources that assist rather than diminish their moral and intellectual and spiritual growth. Finally, be vigilant to sustain your spiritual life, since regression is possible in this very tumultuous world that we find ourselves in. Mental well-being fades when we succumb to bad judgments rooted in our passions and our spiritual ignorance. Unless we use virtue, it will weaken and it will die. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics state that it is not possible to be good in the strict sense without practical wisdom, nor is practically wise without moral virtue. As occupational beings ourselves, occupational therapists can apply practical wisdom with virtue when they connect spirit to spirit with their clients. Mental health self-care means careful oversight of our own spiritual life. So that's is where I'm going to end. There are some references here, and I would love to have some questions and a conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duncan. I mean, like, the topic was just so good. I feel like maybe 20 minutes wasn't enough for it. we were getting like feedback here that even though it was like you mentioned it was philosophical, it was still somehow very practical. So now we're going to have a forum. We also have in with us today, we have um, Dr. Kihian Lim. He just arrived, so he'll also be joining us for our forum. Hello, Dr. Kihian Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. So, again, for our participants, if you have any questions, please do send them in so that we can talk about it and we can have our speakers answer your questions. For now, we have one question here for Dr. Duncan. So, we have a question here. How would you approach cases where your client has different spiritual beliefs from you?
I think the issue is probably having different religious beliefs, and I think that the point I'm making is that we cannot proselytize any particular religion, but what we can do is remain present and connected in just helping the person talk about what they perceive as their spirituality and finding succor and enrichment in that without imposing our own religious beliefs on this, on what they might be struggling with. It's about a holding of spirituality, both ours and theirs, rather than a belief system.
Okay. So it's not like, okay, this is my belief system. You have to follow what I believe in. But then it's really just like, okay, this is what you believe in. Let me help you express that.
Yeah.
Okay. We also have another question here. What are examples of occupations that facilitate spirituality? So can you give some concrete examples?
Well, I did list, I think, some of the occupations that are linked more to the religious space, issues about worship, about singing, about meditation, about creativity, just being able to sit quietly and silently and create something. And I mean, it is very, very hard. And I think this was the point I was trying to make when I showed that slide of activities in mental health. The human occupations are endless. It is about actually finding something where the individual is able to be still within themselves, in the doing, rather than the frantic churning out of actions.
Okay. So it's not more of I have to do this, I have to do that for me to like express my spirituality. It's really like looking in and trying to, it's like being of as a person and expressing this. Not I have to sing, I have to,
Exactly.
write a poem, write a no. It's not that. Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Duncan. We have a question here for Dr. Kihian Lim. He's here with us today. So here we have one from Anna. So is there a tool we can use when working with clients with physical conditions to help screen for mental, social, emotional issues? Dr. Kihian Lim?
I think what you will find that many places that you go to, especially physical hospitals, they will have a range of tools that you might use. I mean, there are obviously, if you have someone with depression, then you might very well, as part of your assessments, use something like the Black Depression Inventory Scale or something like that. But actually, I think what's really important is not to jump to assessment immediately. Because there is a problem with us being so worried about using assessment when we don't actually fully understand what the situation is with the individual. So I would say to you, yes, obviously there are some assessments around that you can use, and it's important to be familiar with them. If, for example, in your practice setting, you notice that actually very often there are patients presenting in a particular way and you need to know more about them. But actually, it's really important to, in working with them, get a sense of actually what their story is and what their narrative is. even in a physical setting. So, we have OTs in the UK, we have OTs working in A&E, and sometimes they have a individual comes in and they seem to have a physical issue, which is why they present at A&E, but actually underlying that there are a series of mental health issues. So it's about actually understanding the person and where they're coming from, what their issues are on a broader, more holistic way, and then choosing the right tool rather than just going to the tool immediately, uh, which can reduce that kind of client-centered practice that we all want to do, because we have a better appreciation of, what it is that troubles the individual beyond the physical presentation that they
So it's important really to just to get their story, get their side, instead of just like, okay, I think this is the tool, this is it. You know.
Yeah, I think there is a danger of us just having a toolkit and then just jumping in without really fully appreciating the complexity that the person, presents with.
Mhm. Yeah. We have another question here, Dr. Lim. It's so Minnie's asking. So there are many people who are in need of MHPSS debriefing. So she asked, what about using the multiplier approach?
Sorry, I'm not familiar with what MHPSS stands for.
Mental health, psychosocial. Or yeah. So, sorry. There.
Okay. I must confess, okay, I'm not totally familiar. I'm assuming it's something that you all use quite often in the Philippines. Uh, but I would say that uh, I think with any individual that you have to really appreciate there is something of that trauma that they're going through. Then
Mhm.
you need to unpick that, and it might be that you use a whole range of tools. Use the one that's most suitable uh, in discovering, and you don't have to limit yourself to one tool. And it doesn't have to be assessment too. Actually,
Mhm.
there are lots of interventions that we use that actually have the capacity and ability to open things up for the individual and for us to understand them much more. So, if you're working in disaster relief, you're working with children, you can use artwork, you can use games, you can use
Yeah.
lots of different things to unpick that kind of psychological, emotional impact of a situation. You can use drama. Uh, Lots of these things are interventions, but actually they also form a way of us being able to assess the person in front of us in many different ways
Yeah.
around the impact of whatever the situation might be on them. Uh, so I'm not quite sure when you mean a multiplier approach, whether that's what you mean, but um, I would say, you know, uh, have a whole set of tools,
Mhm.
be flexible with it, understand the individual before you. I think I often say this to the people. It's good to have a toolkit with like a big bag with lots of things, but be flexible and adaptable with it.
Yeah.
Uh, if you are um, very fixed with just one set of tools, then actually the danger is that you can end up being driven by the assessments and the tools, and not actually being driven by an appreciation, understanding of where the individual is coming from, and actually,
Mhm.
as Dr. Duncan said, about what actually is important to them.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes our perception of what's important to the individual is very much based on our own values and our own ideals. And actually, they could be quite different from what that person wants.
Yeah.
Uh, so, I think we have to be open minded. We
Mhm.
have to accepting, but we have to be adaptable and flexible. So I'm sorry, but that's kind of a big
Yeah.
round approach to answering a question.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's also like a different discussion, like a more in-depth discussion that we can get into. Um, there are actually a lot of questions going on, but in the interest of time, can we just know like how else we could contact you, Dr. Lim and Dr. Duncan? How we could contact you, how our participants could contact you if in case they have a question on your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to share my email here for my
Okay.
my work email, and that's fine. But I actually know a few people on this forum from
Oh,
previous, like Mike Sai and so on. So you you can I'm by all means just contact me. I'm quite happy to share ideas. I think quite interestingly, Dr. Duncan was talking about loneliness, isolation. That's actually an area that I do some research and work in, and quite a few of the things that she said, actually they are real issues that
mhm.
affect a lot of people, not just the people that have illness, but actually just everyone in the public forum. I think maybe what's happened with the pandemic has actually highlighted how important these issues are and
Yeah.
the impact it has, especially with people having, I don't know, in different countries. In the UK, for example, we're going through our second lockdown. So this is
Oh,
an interesting thing where you've got to limit yourself, and then suddenly people are talking much more openly about mental health.
yeah.
We're talking much more about loneliness,
Mhm.
isolation, and wholesale issues. So yeah, whatever people feel they want to have a discussion about, I'm I'm happy to have a chat with them. I will just
Oh,
put my email in there,
okay.
and then, yeah.
Okay. So you're sending in your email. We have Dr. Duncan who sent in her email through the chat as well. Dr. Duncan, any final words? How else we could contact you if we have any questions?
No, as you indicated, I retired in 2018, but
Oh,
because I
yeah.
was emeritus professor, I've still used my university contact details, and
Mhm.
I'm involved with quite a lot of work in the African region. So I really invite communication, and I indicated earlier to the Restart therapists, I'm very excited about
Yeah.
actually inviting them to speak to the group in Cameroon where we are
Mhm.
launching OT. And there's not a single OT in that country. So it's going to be really good to have conversations between the Philippine OTs and the emerging OTs who might come out of that country shortly.
Okay. So, thank you so much for that, Dr. Duncan and Dr. Kian Lim. Thank you so much for your time to talk with us today and to present for answering all our questions. Thank you so much. If ever there are questions, the participants may contact you or we'll forward some questions in. We have a special request here. So Minnie wants to say hi to Doc Maddie just for a bit there. So we have Minnie.
I'm excited.
There, there, there. Okay. Um, there. So, Minnie, do you wanna say hi while we prepare for our next parts of our program? There. Okay. Um. So there. Okay. So now, thank you so much again, Dr. Lim and Dr. Duncan. Well, so let's now move on to our next part of our program. This will be our last talk. It's a very small, short introduction to what we do as Filipino occupational therapists for mental health. So here we have Nicole. She's the lead occupational therapist at a DOH retained wellness hospital in Mariveles, Bataan. Apart from her clinical work, she has been involved in research projects such as the development of a readiness program for people with mental health concerns, instrument development, and occupational justice in drug rehabilitation practice. She is also active in providing support in disaster and crisis management, such as the Dangvaksha, the Taal eruption, and even now in COVID-19. So she's also advocates for mental health through co-founding the Filipino Occupational Therapists for Mental Health, hashtag your safe space. So without further ado, let's all welcome Nicole.
So, mental health, as epidemiologists predict, will be the next concern following COVID-19 pandemic. In numbers, a large portion of the world population is affected by mental health concerns. However, Mental health concerns are more than the signs and symptoms that manifest in a person. Other factors that lead to mental health problems are social and occupational injustices. Aside from the unique vulnerability threshold that each person has, other factors also weigh in, such as psychosocial problems, unstable family relationships, political misgovernance, discrimination, and stigma. Other examples are inaccessible health systems that should inclusively provide help to others, an educational system that does not regard the mental health or life status of its students, occupational injustices like imbalance, where people may perform too much or too little of daily activities, which may seem status quo, alienation, where people may be forced to perform daily activities that evade their unique selves, among others, to remain uncharted. In our world today, mental health of each person is in the verge of decline due to so much uncertainties brought by the pandemic, and is worsened by isolation due to the minimal health standards that must be followed to combat the pandemic. Here at the Filipino Occupational Therapist for Mental Health, it is our mission to become your safe space for Filipinos with mental health concerns and those who wish to improve their well-being through meaningful and purposeful occupations. Now, you might ask, what does this have to do with the value of having a safe space for Filipinos who are occupational therapists? First, let us begin with the sense of belonging. Most carers, especially occupational therapists, have a high tendency to have compassion fatigue. This is where the emotional residue or strain of exposure to working with those suffering from consequences of traumatic events. It differs from burnout, but can coexist. Compassion fatigue can also occur due to the exposure of one case, or can be due to a cumulative level of trauma. Having a positive sense of belonging has been found to enhance interpersonal, professional, and academic success, improve self-concept, to be a protective factor for suicide, and overall to be vital to psychological functioning. Safe spaces don't coddle us or blind us from the realities of our world. They offer us a brief opportunity to be vulnerable and let down our guard without fear of judgment or harm. They allow us to build resilience so that when we're outside of these spaces, we can engage maturely with our peers and be the strongest, most authentic versions of ourselves. Most importantly, safe spaces allows us to practice self-care so we can continue making thoughtful, productive contributions to difficult discussions inside and outside of the workplace. When we think about safe spaces in the context of mental health, it's obvious how they can be beneficial, and perhaps an essential part of everyone's life. We learn how to navigate discomfort, we learn from our failure, and approach new experiences with confidence. Stigma, however, dictates that only people with mental illness should consult to get help. Your safe space can be a preemptive measure to ensure a flourishing mental health, breaking the stigma into a more promotive and positive outlook in prioritizing mental health care. Your safe space can also be an avenue for occupational therapists who wish to harbor skills, knowledge, and attitude to better their practice and to increase the quality of their services. Sharing research findings and best practices can create a network of innovation among Filipino occupational therapists for mental health, or at the very least, herald mental health into their practice one step at a time. Occupational therapists play a key role in promoting mental health through meaningful and purposeful occupations. The Filipino Occupational Therapist for Mental Health is motivated to achieve its vision to promote mental health as occupational therapists through accessible, up-to-date platforms so that we can be more inclusive and palpable even at times of the crisis. Next, to advocate mental health in an occupational therapy perspective, hoping that this vision will help others realize the value of occupation and its contributions to overall health. To be able to create a group that will provide opportunities for interested occupational therapists to enhance learning and practice that is specialized in mental health from an occupational therapy perspective, to continuously uphold standards of practice and innovation. To strengthen our advocacy for mental health through partnership and expanding the membership to more Filipino advocates for mental health. Occupational therapists are team players that are trained to collaborate with other professionals in order to promote mental health in the community. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I am Nicole Ronaldo from the Filipino Occupational Therapists for Mental Health, your safe space.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for that. So again, that's just a short introduction to FOT for MH, or Filipino Occupational Therapists for Mental Health. So that basically ends all our topics and all our talks for today. We hope you learned a lot. We hope that you enjoyed this. I know I learned so many things. I know that I got so many things, like my take home points. So before anything else, again, we'd like to thank all our speakers today from March PSS, Restart, Dr. Kian Lim, Dr. Duncan, and Nicole. Thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your knowledge and passion on occupational therapy and occupational therapy mental health. We'd like to present a certificate of appreciation to our speaker. So it reads, wait, let's wait for our presentation. So this certificate of appreciation, we'll just send it to you via email later on. So for our for our speakers, we have a certificate of appreciation, which is awarded to Maria Minerva G. Lagria, OTRP, for sharing his or her time and expertise on mental health to the Filipino Occupational Therapy for Mental Health, FOT for MH webinar through the Kaleidoscope, November 22, 2023 to 5 p.m. So we also present the certificate of appreciation to Ana Liza Yap Tan Pascual, MRS OTRP, to Jan Martha A. Celeste OTRP, to Madeline Duncan, Doctor of Philosophy, to Kiken Lim, PhD, and okay, so that's for our speakers, and also for our participants. Will also be emailing certificates of participation. So can we show our certificates for our participants? Okay, so our certificate. Certificate of attendance is awarded to, so we'll insert your name here, for being part of the first Filipino Occupational Therapy for Mental Health, FOT for MH webinar through the Kaleidoscope this November 22, 2020, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. So again, we'll be sending these certificates via email. Okay, so basically that's it for our program. Before we end and before we have like a short picture taking and everything, we'd like to get your feedback regarding this event. So just a short feedback through Mentimeter, so that we know what else you could improve on, or what other topics that you'd like for our next webinars. So we have our Mentimeter here with the code 3320383. So please do send in your feedback, how effective or not effective you think the program is, so that we can actually improve more for our next webinars. Dr. Kiken Lim also mentioned in the chat that you can find him on Facebook, which is another way to get in touch. Please do send in your feedback through this code. So you can go to www.menti.com and then use the code 3320383 for your feedback. So it's www.menti.com. Okay, so there we have some responses coming in already. So just some few feedback so that we can improve in for the next topics. Thank you so much, Dr. Duncan, for that. Okay, so we have in some responses already. Thank you as well, Dr. Kihan Lim. Thank you so much for your time. I know like the time difference. Thank you again so much for that. And then having to prepare beforehand, even with your busy workload. Okay, so so I think we have another question here for our feedback just before we end. So this is more of what needs to be improved so that we can see what else we can do for our next webinar. So that the same www.menti.com and then use the code 3320383. So after this, we have one more question and then we'll just have short picture taking and closing remarks. Okay, so we see here some of the sounds are not so clear, so more technical, and then we have one for breakout rooms. Okay, so maybe breakout rooms for our next webinar can be something we can try to do. If you have other suggestions or other things to improve on, please do send them in. So we have technical problems, I think, yes, technical problems. So please do send them in, continue to send them in, and then our next question would be what your suggestion is, suggested topics for next event there. So this is our last feedback question. Same, it's the code is 7095609. So this has a different code. Again, the code is 7095609. So input in like what you want for our next event, topics that you're interested in that you'd like to learn about, or if you'd like specific like activities instead of like a regular lecture thing, please do send them in so that we can also prepare for it. In the meantime, we'd like to thank our partner organizations today. Again, thank you so much for our partners for helping us make this possible. We'd like to thank March PSS, Restart, Open Arms Organization, JCI Batangas Balisong, Zero Kilometro, and Parola. Okay, so we have there are, so we have one, so we have CBR topic. If you can try to make it more specific, what exactly about CBR would you like to learn about? So that we can prepare and we can also get like, or if you want a specific speaker, if you want like this okay, teletherapy, so that can also be, please do send in your suggestions so that we can prepare for it for our next event. If you want like a suggestion for a time, do you think like Sundays work for you at this time? Would you like it on a different day? Send in your suggestions so that we can have it. Okay. Okay, so further elaboration of the roles of OTs in correctional settings. Okay. So please do continue to send them in. Okay, so we have different platforms, different topics on our suggestions. Okay, so while you're sending your suggestions in, I'd like to call on Rod, Charlie, De Los Reyes for our closing remarks. And after our closing remarks, we'll have a short picture taking.
So, hi everyone. So, good afternoon, good morning for everyone. Okay, so this is just a very quick closing remark for everyone. And I would like to congratulate, of course, Cami for hosting us, and of course, all our partners for this event. Without you guys, we would not be able to actually have this event, make this event successful. And on behalf of Filipino OT for Mental Health and Open Arms Organization, I'm very glad to be able to know a lot of people right now and to actually interact with great speakers. And we're hoping to actually have them again to our next more extensive time of seminars or workshops. And we hope that all participants who are here right now would be actually following all of the organizations that actually made this happen, because we have a lot of things in store for you. And with that, thank you. And let's just have take a photo for this webinar. Okay, so if everyone could actually have their cameras on so that we can capture each other, because this is a very momentous event for Filipino OT for MH, and of course for our other partners who are working with us with this program. So can we turn on our cameras? Cami, are you going? Okay.
Okay, so on me, I have 2 pages. I feel like on different screens, it may be different. So just keep smiling, so because we don't know which page you're on. Okay, so for the first page, okay, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, great. Okay, so now we have our second page. Again, just smile because you
Keep
don't know what
smiling.
page you're on. Yeah, just keep smiling. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there you go. So I guess I think that's it. Again, thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again in our future events. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. So